It's the 22nd of November, 2019. A Ring doorbell begins recording as a young girl approaches a home in the Harriet Creek Ranch neighborhood of Texas. It's pitch black out and the girl is seen all alone, which by itself is strange enough, but it's moments later that this footage becomes truly concerning.
Help, please! Please help!
She was begging for help, pounding her hand against the door, all the while continuously turning her head around, as if she was expecting someone to come up behind her. The footage then comes to an abrupt end, only to start again seconds later, but this entire time, no one answers that door. The wait was just too unbearable for the child as she then took off. Yelling incoherently in the street before running out of view of the camera. Frustratingly, this footage was only viewed by the homeowner well after the fact, and reports seem to indicate that this was a property that they rented out rather than lived in, with it being unoccupied on that night. But after seeing the video, the homeowner immediately contacted law enforcement and shared the video online in the hopes that more information would come forward, as it seems that neither they nor the police had any idea who this child was or why she needed help. But since these clips were first shared, these questions have still yet to be answered, at least publicly, as there have been no updates from law enforcement. Along with this, there have been no accounts from neighbors about the incident or any footage from other homes in the neighborhood, perhaps implying that this was her one and only stop of the night. It's like after this footage, this girl dropped off the face of the earth, with this entire situation being a mystery to this day, leaving us with only theories. The first and most popular theory is that this girl was an escaped victim of kidnapping, or perhaps an abusive household, and had run to the closest home to ask for help. We've seen situations like this many times before, with the most popular example at the moment being the case of Ruby Frankie, whose son escaped their house and ran to their neighbor for help.
Wondering if you could do 2 favors, taking me to the nearest police station. Well, actually, just one's fine.
This certainly falls in line with this girl's behavior, as she was clearly scared about someone or something following her, hence why she kept looking back. And given that there have been no updates to this case, and that seemingly no one else saw her that night, it would indicate that whoever she was running from had recaptured her shortly after.
Yeah.
And what makes this theory even more horrifying is that many online users believe that this girl isn't the only person shown in this footage.
And I think it's this person
As in the
right here.
background, some can see what appears to be movement behind the bush, and potentially even a figure.
Please help!
And this just so happens to be the direction that this girl is looking in every time she turns back, almost like she knew someone was hiding there. Which brings us to our second theory.
What is this video?
That this entire thing was a setup. The belief here is that this girl was coerced into going up to a stranger's home to beg for help, so that when this unsuspecting homeowner would open their door, those people who made the girl do this would then rush into the home and rob the person. This could explain why she was looking at that bush so frequently, as that's where this person or these persons would have been hiding, and she was looking to them for guidance, perhaps unprepared for the homeowner not to open their door.
Could also be a robbery.
Both of these theories are disturbing in their own right, and both clearly indicate that this girl is in need of help, regardless of what the situation is. But still, there's been no confirmation as to whatever happened to this child, even despite the public interest. One of the biggest talking points online came from some theorizing that this girl might be Serenity Denard, a then 9-year-old girl who had gone missing in February of 2019 from a children's facility in South Dakota, who looked eerily similar to the child shown in this video. But in my research, I was able to find a Facebook post from one of Serenity's mothers, who shared that they were in fact aware of the video, and that they had actually contacted law enforcement about it. And in her post, she claims that investigators told her that the girl had been identified at some point, and that she had lived in that neighborhood, with there being no further elaboration as to why she was asking for help.
Yes, that's better. That's better. Yeah, don't open the door.
This is quite literally one of the only updates I was able to find, but unfortunately it was one that I wasn't able to confirm, and it also fails to explain what exactly happened to this girl. leaving this footage and this entire scenario as one of the many mysteries of the internet.
Mysteries of the Internet, Volume 1. Wait, I literally just called it. No way.
Throughout my time here on YouTube, I've stumbled across some of the most frightening things on the internet.
Skinwalkers.
But one of the discoveries that scared me the most was my own personal information, just out there in the open on random sites that can be accessed by anyone. This is all because of data brokers who sold my information, making private things like my phone number available for anyone to see. But luckily, I would keep your identity free and stress away. Try Aura for 14 days at aura.com/Crowley, and in those 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold either.
Amsterdam, I can't read this.
It started with a police chase. An officer parked alongside a highway in North Amsterdam had witnessed a black Mercedes speeding down the road and was now desperately trying to keep up with it. But the effort was to no avail, as the Mercedes would soon disappear from the officer's view. And when it would come back into view minutes later, it wasn't moving. It was instead left abandoned on the side of the road, the driver's side door hanging wide open, and the driver himself being nowhere to be seen, leaving that officer alone with the suspect's car, but no suspect. However, the vehicle hadn't been left entirely empty, as in the driver's rush to flee the scene, he had accidentally left his cell phone behind, and so the contents of this phone would be searched, which quickly led to the discovery of this driver's identity. But for investigators, there was a far more pressing finding on that device. A finding in the form of a minute-long video stored on the man's camera roll that indicated that this driver may have been involved in a crime far worse than just speeding.
Oh no.
The footage was taken inside a different vehicle and showed an unseen driver holding up his cell phone alongside another man in the passenger seat. The camera was focused on a car in front of them, with both men seeming intent on catching up with it, as in the moments before this recording started, something had happened between them, which the men inside this car felt they had to get revenge for. They referred to this unseen incident as an act of brutality by a group of men in this other vehicle, and by the looks of it, it's likely that this car had simply cut them off, as there was a freshly closed lane in the stretch of road at the time, which created an unexpected merge. And this is most likely what this group inside this separate car thought too, as they were showing no signs of road rage, and were instead just casually driving with the flow of traffic. However, it's clear that the men behind the camera felt differently. As in their minds, what this other driver had done to them was so awful that it was worthy of only one punishment: death.
To shoot their car? They have to pay, right? What? I guess because we're gonna get them.
And so, this duo inched their vehicle closer and closer to this anonymous car, while continuing their rambling about this act of brutality. And when they finally positioned themselves next to the vehicle, the man in the passenger seat brandished a pistol and pointed it directly at the driver of this vehicle. The footage from here is incredibly shaky, and the window had been rolled down, causing the audio to peak and become distorted and indecipherable. Because of this, it's hard to say for sure what happens next, but it appears that the man holding the gun attempts to fire the weapon before pulling it back into the car,
It looks like
cocking the
it
revolver
jammed or
once
something.
more, and firing again. To which both men erupt with laughter and begin celebrating, before the recording stops.
They don't like drugs or something?
Based on the footage, it's unclear what happened to the driver of this vehicle or the other occupants, and finding this information became priority 1 for law enforcement. In their research, they determined that this video was shot on May 12, 2014, at around 9:40 p.m., 1 full month before they had stumbled upon it, and it had been taken on the A1 highway near entrance 2101. And yet, when they checked their files to match this information with any of their cases, they realized that there was no record of this incident. This crime had never so much as been reported, despite it seeming to depict a shooting in the middle of a busy highway. To make matters more confusing, police were able to track down the men who took this video and carried out the actual attack, and yet neither of them claimed to know what happened to the people that they shot at, and both refused to elaborate any further, leaving investigators in a strange position. They had undeniable proof of a crime, one that at the very least was attempted
but
murder,
no
and they
victim.
also had their suspects. They just didn't have any victims. And so they studied the footage even more, which is when they made a disturbing revelation about these victims. Throughout the video, the perpetrators refer to the people within this car as a group of men, and while the footage we have today has the occupants' faces blurred, they were able to conclude that the driver was in fact a man. However, they discovered that the passenger next to him is clearly a woman wearing a headscarf. And most shocking of all, in the back seat was what appeared to be a child, meaning that they had been shooting at what, in all likelihood, was a family. Police released this video to the public later that year under the name Amsterdam Sheet Incident Ringway A10, or Amsterdam Shooting Incident on Ring Road A10, where they revealed this footage but disguised the voices and faces of the perpetrators for unknown reasons. And in releasing this, they asked the public to come forward with any information that could help identify this family. They asked for witnesses on the scene, car repair shops that may have fixed a car with bullet holes, any hospitals that had shooting victims on or around that day, and most importantly, they asked for the family inside this car to come forward, as without their testimony, convicting these men was nearly impossible, as it wasn't fully clear what crime they'd even committed. That was 11 years ago, and to this day, no one has come forward, leaving us with only theories. The first theory is that the people shot at in this footage may have been undocumented immigrants, or perhaps one of them had a warrant out for their arrest.
That sounds likely.
If they were to report this crime, or if they were to have gone to the hospital with a bullet wound, then police would have certainly got involved, and in turn they would have gotten in trouble as well, essentially forcing them to stay quiet as saying anything would put their freedom in jeopardy. Another theory is that the shots may have simply missed the vehicle, and the driver decided not to report it, with some believing that this whole situation was no big deal.
Theory 2 is kind of
this
dumb.
Doesn't seem like something that would be so easily
weird.
brushed off, especially because a child is involved, though it is possible that perhaps this family was afraid to report the crime, as they clearly knew how dangerous
Theory
these
2
men
is
were,
just
and feared
not
that
real.
reporting this crime would only further put a target on their backs. And finally, there's the theory that this weapon never fired at all. This is where the audio peaking becomes a major factor, as it's extremely difficult to make out the sound of gunshots, as the gun was literally outside of the vehicle when it was seemingly being fired. But it is worth noting that investigators working the case seemed confident that the weapon fired at least once, and I also personally hear a distinct popping sound at the end. But it's hard to say for
and
sure.
they're laughing.
And it also is possible that this group was using blanks, with this all being an attempt to trick the other driver into thinking that he was in danger. But even with these theories, we still have no idea the fate that befell this family, and it's clear that they have no desire to come forward, for reasons we just don't know. Which leaves the Amsterdam shooting video, an internet mystery that may never be solved.
Kind of crazy, actually. Norm.
Urgent, I need help, please.
No, Rob.
We are from
Urgent.
BSAS West Zone, Castelar, San Juan neighborhood. Her name is Emma Rosario Culk, who's been missing since Friday, June 12th. If you saw her, please call. Any information will be appreciated. This post was made to the subreddit r/Argentina on June 16th, 2020 by a user named u/Naram, who asked for the public's help in finding a missing woman named Emma Culk, and in the comments he would offer more context, saying, "She went out to buy something and never came back. She was last seen here in the neighborhood. Sanchez and Pavan is the area where she went to buy something. She was dressed in the clothes that she's seen in the photo. She was carrying her wallet with her ID and a cell phone." Quickly, the post was inundated with concerned citizens wanting to help in the matter, with the gravity of the situation being made even greater, as earlier that day, Naram had made a similar post, which revealed that Emma Culk was actually his mother. This revelation only made the post more important, as people left comments offering support and encouragement, with many even providing advice on how he could potentially track her down, to which Naram seemed genuinely grateful. Across the entire internet, this seems to be the first post ever made on Emma's disappearance, but it would be far from the last, as people spread this information far and wide almost immediately after Naram's post, which was also followed by several local news reports. which proved that Emma was in fact a real person and was in fact missing, with these articles mentioning something that her son had not, that she was feared to have been taken. The only thing we know for sure is that she went into her house, left her bike, and for some reason went out but did not come back in. Apparently, she did not leave on purpose, and that is what worries us the most. Things were clearly very concerning, and the tension of the situation only increased as a day passed, and then two, with Naram vowing to keep everyone updated on the status of the search. And sure enough, right after this update, Naram's missing mother would finally be found. The worst news, Emma Rosario Kolk was murdered. She had been missing since June 12th. Her son killed her with stab wounds and then buried her in the backyard of his house.
What?
He was arrested. Rest in peace, Emma. Emma Kolk had been found dead, murdered and buried in her own backyard, with the perpetrator allegedly being her own son, Daniel Kolk, who had confessed to stabbing her once in the chest and then twice in the head before burying her body in the backyard, with a motive never being given. The ending to Emma's search was disturbing, but perhaps the most shocking part was the revelation that she was killed by her own son, 20-year-old Daniel Kolk, which immediately called into question Naram's Reddit post, as he had claimed to be Emma's son, leading many to wonder, was Naram the killer? And so, desperate for clarification, someone commented, "By any chance, are you 20 years old?" To which Naram actually responded, writing simply, 25, before eventually leaving the following explanation. "Apparently, it was my brother. That's what the police said when they declared the crime." This would mean that when Naram had been making these pleas to find his mother, in reality, not only was she already dead, but she had been killed by his own brother and buried in their backyard. It's one of the most chilling things I've ever come across on Reddit, but the intrigue of this case doesn't exactly end here, as there was something about Naram's story that wasn't quite adding up. Just days before the disappearance of his mother, he had left a comment on an unrelated post saying, "When I was 8 years old, I wanted to ride a bicycle without hands, according to me because it was easy. I was on the street, dirt, and I let go of the handlebars, and here I am at 19 years old, with the handlebars marked on my abdomen." In his own words, Naram wasn't 25, but instead 19 years old, and potentially 20 years old by the time his mother was found, which put him at the exact age range as Daniel Kolk. This prompted a wave of speculation and confusion and spawned the enduring mystery: who exactly is Naram? While making things even stranger, digging deeper into his posting history, you can find another comment where he claims to have been working the same job for 6 years, which seemed to contradict the idea of him being 20, thus prompting even more confusion, which eventually caught Naram's attention, who responded by stating, "I didn't write that. It must have been my brother. I don't use this social network. I only used it twice for a work issue and now because my mother disappeared. This account is not mine." This recounting of events made Naram's initial story even more twisted, as if this was true, then not only was it his own brother that killed the mother he was looking for, but he was literally using that same brother's account. And again, this gets stranger. Around the same time, Naram would thank the internet for its help on the case, and then proceed to swiftly disappear, leaving the account untouched for over 2 years. But this silence would be broken in 2022 when they suddenly returned, with their posts being slightly unhinged, gloating about their internet status and bizarrely lashing out at random users who questioned him on his past and present motives. And in these ramblings, he would drop the bombshell that he wasn't actually Emma's son. He now claimed to be Daniel's best friend, writing that he allowed Daniel to make the post on his account to spread the news about his mother's disappearance, which he was completely unaware that Daniel himself had caused. This was the last real update in this case, and it only threw more fuel on the fire of this mystery, with people wondering what version of events, if any, were true.
It's confusing everyone.
When I hear about this case today, many seem to believe that the entire time Naram was actually Daniel Kolk, and he had made this post to make it seem like he was searching for his mother, and perhaps to even use any given advice to help conceal what he did. As
that would make sense.
Many were offering suggestions on how to find her, which Daniel in turn could have used to essentially do the exact opposite, to help make sure that she was never found. This is tricky because the account posted briefly after Daniel was supposedly arrested. However, the status of this case is entirely unknown to this day, as there have been no updates as to whether or not Daniel was actually charged, with some choosing to believe that this was him the entire time, and perhaps he was even held in prison for a few years before being released, thus explaining his 2-year absence. Another theory is that Naram was initially telling the truth, and that he was Daniel's brother, and that he was simply using the account to spread word of his mother's disappearance
but that's weird,
before
man.
eventually abandoning it. And perhaps the most recent posting on this account was because it may have been hacked, which would explain the massive tone shift. Or maybe it's the most recent version of events that's the right one, and that this is actually Daniel's best friend. But why initially lie? And how do you explain the apparent inconsistencies in his age that are found throughout his posts? This entire internet mystery is one of the messiest I've ever come across, and nothing seems to make any sense, with the most inexplicable part being the very real murder at its core. A mother who was killed by her own son for no apparent reason, and given the lack of updates, it's hard to know if justice was ever served.
Angeline Pete's final Facebook
It took
post.
several months for Angeline Pete's family to report her as missing. She had a long history of leaving home for extended periods of time, running off to join the circus and hitchhiking rides all across the Vancouver area, before eventually returning home to her normal life. But this time it felt different. None of her friends or family had heard from her since May of 2011, and it was now nearing the end of summer. This was especially odd considering that Angeline was known to be constantly texting, as well as updating her Facebook profile, with that profile now sitting completely dormant. But within that page filled with your typical selfies and normal life updates, there was one post that stood out, the final post she ever made. This photo was posted without context on May 20th, 2011, a day that just so happened to be the very last time that the vast majority of Angeline's friends and family members had heard from her. And when looking into the context of this image, her disappearance only becomes more concerning. That night, Angeline had been drinking with her fiancé Robert Calden in downtown Vancouver, and while the two were waiting to catch a ferry back home, something had sparked an argument, which eventually led to a full-on physical altercation. This fight caused such a stir that eventually police would arrive on the scene, where they noted that Angeline's lip had been busted, leading to them placing Robert under arrest. Though in the end, no charges would ever be filed, as Angeline refused to give officers a statement and instead insisted on just going home, which led to the whole thing seemingly being dropped. It was direct.
Yeah, I gotta it said I have to appeal it, but I haven't appealed it yet. It is what it is. They are all gone. Yeah.
After this, that Angeline would post this photo to her Facebook account without any sort of context, before proceeding to disappear into thin air. Her motivation for doing this isn't 100% known, but one could assume that she was trying to make a record of this attack, perhaps in case something were to happen to her. The timing of this is more than a little suspicious, and paints a horrifying picture of the potential fate of Angeline. That she had been murdered by Robert Calden as a result of their fight on the 20th of May. It's a case that seems as straightforward as it is disturbing, but that's only on the surface, as there was another factor at play here, as when the police stopped this couple from fighting on that fateful night, Robert wasn't the only one facing jail time. Angeline was no stranger to abuse. She had a long history of it herself, with her ex-boyfriend claiming to have suffered dozens of black eyes throughout their relationship, which had ended years prior. This violent behavior often stemmed from her trouble with alcohol, and Robert was clearly one and the same, with the two forming an extremely toxic relationship that often ended in one or both of them getting hurt. It was all too normalized for the pair, which was highlighted by one of Angeline's final texts, where she wrote, "Gee, my lip hurts. I hate him so much that I love him." Now I do want to make it clear that this is in no way meant to come across as victim blaming, but this is vital information for this case, as Angeline's history with violence had landed her in prison numerous times.
I don't know how much is there, but I would usually post not all of them, but I would post most of them. Most
times. Most recently in 2009, when she was arrested for getting into a massive bar fight. This arrest in particular is noteworthy, as it carried with it multiple conditions. One of which was that Angeline was given a 9 p.m. curfew, and the other was that she was not allowed to drink, with both of these conditions being broken on the night of May 20th, when police intervened in her and Robert's fight. This meant that Angeline was now likely going to be reincarcerated, and sure enough, that same night, officers arrived at her home to question her on the matter, but she failed to answer the door, which led to a warrant being made for her arrest 5 days later on May 25th. That day, a squad car pulled up to Angeline's apartment to bring her into custody, but when police entered the home, they would only find Robert, who just so happened to be on the phone with her. And officers claimed to have spoken with Angeline during that phone call, where they advised her to turn herself in, though she claimed that she was no longer in the area, and eventually hung up the phone. This would be the last time that officers would speak to Angeline Pete, and seemingly according to Robert, she returned home and left the very next day on the 26th, and never came back. This whole revelation muddies the water in this case, and provides us with our second theory, that Angeline Pete had run away to avoid reincarceration.
That would make
There's
sense.
something unusual to me about this phone call with police. Now, there's hardly any information about this case online, but from all the articles that I've read, it seems that no one in Angeline's life had heard from her after this photo was taken, with the exception of Robert. And when police spoke with her, it was only over the phone. They too hadn't laid eyes on her since the night of May 20th, prompting some to wonder if Robert had arranged for some sort of decoy to make this phone call. Though, however it happened, since that phone call, there has been no activity on any of Angeline's online accounts, and she's never deposited or spent a single cent from her bank account. From that point on, she's been essentially invisible. That was 15 years ago, and today we still have no concrete answers as to what happened to Angeline Pete, with some taking this as a sign that something sinister had in fact happened to her.
Something
As how
bad
can you go
probably
that
happened.
long without leaving a trail, and without at least trying to come back? Especially in Angeline's case, as she was a mother. Angeline had a 7-year-old son who was by far the most important thing in her life. At the time she went missing, this child was staying with her father, Angeline's former partner, but she still played an incredibly active role in his life, and she wanted to be as involved as she possibly could be. And yet, after 15 years, she's made no attempts to try and reach out to him. Again, people have taken this as a sign that Angeline has perhaps been killed. And it isn't just Robert who they think might have done this, as some believe that she may have been killed by someone that neither they nor Angeline even knew. As I mentioned previously, Angeline had a habit of hitchhiking, and she was known to do so in a way that was overtly dangerous. And interestingly, there were some unconfirmed sightings of Angeline after she went missing, with some reportedly seeing her in Port Hardy and Grand Perrier, areas that she would have had to catch a ride to. Now again, these are totally unconfirmed sightings, but what's so chilling about this is that if she had been hitchhiking through those areas, then she likely would have found herself doing so along Highway 16, which is now known as the Highway of Tears. Without getting too deep into this stretch of road is notorious for its disproportionately high number of women who have gone missing on it, and especially Indigenous women, with Aboriginal organizations claiming that as many as 40 Indigenous women have been killed or kidnapped while on this stretch of road. And coincidentally, Angeline was an Indigenous woman herself, who may have found herself hitchhiking on that very road. Angeline's disappearance is one of those cases that you can convince yourself that every theory is right. But as of right now, there's just no way to know what truly happened to her. And while this is an internet mystery for us, for Angeline's family, this couldn't be more real. Many of them are suspicious about Robert and believe that police didn't do a good enough job investigating him, as he was never even considered a suspect. But they also hold on hope that Angeline is still alive and out there somewhere, and they'll often hold events and vigils to keep her name in the spotlight, and to assure she knows that she can always come back home.
What?
And it's this hope that has fueled her son since she disappeared, as all throughout his childhood he played hockey as a way of helping to find her, with one family member saying, "That's why he wants to play hockey. So if he gets famous, his mom will find him."
Wait, that's actually sad. It's actually really sad. Oh, you got it. Her son wanted to play hockey so that he could get famous and his mom would find him again. Oh, wow. Nightmare?